Hello, my name is Oscar Tsui. Thank you for watching my short film Peking. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how and why I made this short film as my independent study project. So Peking really started as an attempt at self-education. It was towards the middle of the last year that I realized that I really didn't know enough about the city. As someone who is basically born and raised in the city, I often have these moments of locals telling me parables and stories that I didn't know before, or sometimes even worse, my foreign friends telling me about places that I've never seen or I've never been to, showing me around the city that I've basically lived in for half of my life. So carrying that idea of self-education, I really started to observe things going on all over the city, from the color of the buses to the distribution of the subway lines to how the ring roads were formed or how the hutongs are named. There are just so many things that you would overlook if you never looked at it from a brand new perspective. And in short, that really is what I'm trying to achieve with this short film. A different perspective, a different way of looking at the city, and perhaps through that, the ability to discover things that I didn't know about, to rediscover moments that would otherwise be hidden by the city, to uncover stories wherever opportunities can lead me. So that is the goal of the project, really. To take a look at Beijing, to peek at Peking from a brand new perspective. To achieve this, I knew I had to not reinvent something about the city, but actually trying to interpret what's already there from a brand new perspective. And to do that, I simply took the three biggest stereotypes about the city, namely the megacity, the hutongs, and opera. Whenever you talk about Beijing, it's usually that type of megacity, that giant suburb filled with modern buildings and skyscrapers in the likes of the CBD, or the hutongs, right, within the second ring road, that a lot of it is now commercial areas, but still carry a lot of its residents at its heart. Or it's the opera. Whenever there is a lot of talk about the culture, the art to the city, opera would always be part of that story. So when structuring it at an early stage, I tried to use Peking opera as this centerpiece that weaved throughout the story and somehow connect traditions and modernity together with that centerpiece. And it really became pretty convenient for me because opera right now lies at this turning point, this crossroad between traditions and modernity. This very old art form, which first appeared as what we know it today in the early Qing dynasty, really goes back in time. But at the same time, we have countless opera students in the Academy of National Arts, in a lot of other places, not just in Beijing, learning this old art form and trying to turn it into something new, trying to turn it into something modern. When they're trying to do this, they really face this problem of simply not having enough market for this once very popular art form. In basically every interview that I had with students from the National Academy of Chinese Theatre Arts, they always talk about one thing when it comes to opera, which is that it's going to be really difficult for them to find a job. There are simply too many people learning the art form and not enough people appreciating it. It's sort of this mismatch that only exists because of their awkward situation at the turning point of history. But just like any other modern art form, opera is just another modern art form rooted from the old. These actors and actresses, they live just like everybody else in their spare time. They practice 6 hours a day trying to perfect their moves, trying to perfect their performance. Yes, of course, when they do makeup, they look like opera characters, but in their downtime, they're also very fashionable, very modern young kids. I really felt like opera was this thing that could joined with an idea that older Hutong residents described to me as really the state of giving up, of accepting one's own situation, of just being lazy and living a tranquil and peaceful life, and just giving it a laugh whenever it doesn't go as anticipated. And on the other hand, we have these new Beijingers, these young Beijingers, these Beijingers that are actually coming from all over the nation, trying to climb up the ladder, trying to succeed, trying to get something that is more than just tranquil living. And this idea of old and new, this idea of tranquility and competition, these two ideas fundamentally also underlie the state of opera at this very moment. An ancient art form rooted in entertainment, rooted in the idea of comfort and joy, and also a competitive art form that requires a lot of effort and dedication and diligence. And at this crosswalk, it really faces this problem of trying to be what it is, trying to keep up with the world as it moves forward, as people start turning into Western theater. When I was interviewing the opera actors and actresses, they told me that although we still talk about opera whenever we say Beijing, people don't really come to Beijing to watch opera anymore. They really come to Beijing to watch Huaji, which is basically Western theater. It is really problems like these that reflect the state of Beijing at a combination of traditions and modernity, tranquility and competition, and just this constant struggle to be what it is. Technique-wise, visually, I employed a lot of this idea of the long shot, and as well as a lot of overtonal and intellectual montages to mainly reflect two things. One being this almost subjective perspective of the city, this continuity in the shots, this continuity in ideas throughout traditions, opera, and modernity. Long shot basically paints my camera as almost a ghost floating in the city, floating in the opera scenes, trying to show you around. And that combined with overtonal and intellectual montages really not only create this fast pace and rhythm at times, but also this contrasting connection and this rhythm, this sensation of the city. Sound-wise, there is also a variety of styles. I combine 智化 tempo music, 北京智化寺轻音乐, with EDM type music that I felt really reflected the fast pace, the competitiveness, the modernity of the city. And those things combined with very famous opera excerpts like Capturing Sanlang Alive, 活捉三郎, or 霸王别姬, Farewell My Concubine, really brings out this contrasts and continuity of things. When it comes to people, they really define the fundamentals of the film, the nature of the film almost. Because how this film is basically a documentation, a capturing of moments in the city, there's no way of planning it ahead of time other than having the general idea, which I have glazed on earlier, as well as having a list of options of what you can do. So going into this project, I had the basic ideas of filming the very fast-paced modern scenes, as well as some scenes of Hutong life, as well as opera. And that was really it. The rest was basically trying to contact people, trying to find people both online and offline, and just throwing out the web and trying to see what you can get. I was lucky enough finally to, with the help of my friend, film a lot of modern scenes in the CBD area. I was lucky enough to actually gain access to a Hutong resident and his living space, their living space, and document a part of their daily lives. And most importantly, after some 20 messages across social media, I finally came by these two Peking opera actresses that later on we would find out, coincidentally, are both from the National Academy of Chinese Theatre Arts, are both in the same major in the same class. That fun coincidence really encapsulates the nature of the film, of just being very spontaneous, very unpredictable, and with a lot of uncertainty. But when time is right, when you get lucky enough, when opportunity takes you there, you really can create this sensation, this story that runs through it all. And lastly, the style of the film also has a few important influences. Visually, a lot of it is influenced by an independent filmmaker called Brandon Lee, literally carrying out his work under the name Unscripted Studios. He does a lot of work with cities and their stories with basically very uncertain plans. He also often tries to document the city and tell a story without actually speaking it. This is also very similar to Baraka and a lot of other Ron Freeke's work. And structure and sound-wise, I kind of pictured this idea of a symphony with 4 very distinct movements, starting from a fast, brisk, and lively picture and going into a slower, more lyrical one, and thirdly, a faster, a more almost easier, lighter third movement, and finally, in the end, a grand finale that really brings out the loudness of the city, both visually and acoustically. Opera really acted as that third influence because of how its process of preparation to performance matches up with the idea of a symphony, almost like this gradual process of getting larger, of getting grander, of getting more intense little by little. And so the structure of opera very much fit into the symphonic structure. Last but not least, technicality-wise, I mainly use 2 cameras, one being a pocket camera from Sony, the other being a Canon C70 for shots that don't require as much movement, that actually demands higher quality. This project technically took the entire school year, which is around 7-8 months, but the school year being the school year, the majority of that time is at school and doing schoolwork. So I would say that planning and filming and contacting overall took, if you condense all of these things, probably took around 2 months, with filming spanning across 8 months, but probably all in 1 month's time. I had about 1 terabyte of footage in the end. I also didn't really lean very heavily into picture quality. I shot in 2K at 60 frames per second, just so I could slow it down if needed, but at the same time to avoid ultimately getting a giant file size that I cannot handle in post-production. And post-production probably took around a week, 2 or 3 days in that week. I had 8-9 hour editing sessions non-stop, which definitely isn't healthy, but gets the work done. So that pretty much concludes what I have to say for my short film Peking, a short film, an attempt to document and reflect the sensation to the city, a peek into the city, a peek at Peking, and a story told with images, sound, and people. Thank you for your time.